When people look at the Beach Boys SMiLE album, they look at it realistically for the most part. They this thing, they listen to the music, they read the lyrics, and they look at the artwork and all the packaging and this and that, and they base their opinion on what it is based on that viewpoint. This is what I'm looking at. This is what it is. But I think there's an underlying reality that goes beyond the SMiLE album itself. There's another layer to this that folks don't see, and I think it has to do with the inspiration for SMiLE. Brian had a few LSD trips, and that gave him some insight, the spiritual insight, and he wanted to put that in album form. He'd had a hit previously with a psychedelic work, Good Vibrations, and it was a massive hit, and now it was time to do an album that would continue on in that direction, that psychedelic direction. And there was no rules of the game, no rules to play with, or genre standards or anything at that point. So everyone was making it up as they went along, if you will. So as a person who has not had any experience with that drug, I consulted this book, and this book studied, as the authors, they studied LSD in the 60s, and they came up with, it was done in California, and typical dosages. And one thing that they found is when people leave the state, not the state of California or Ohio or anything, but the state of being under the influence, they do not perceive it as having been an illusion, hallucination, or delusion. Rather, they see it as the fundamental reality that underlies all reality. And I think you get that in SMiLE. You have the thing you're looking at, the reality, if you will, but there's another fundamental reality underneath that, and the realization of that is actually a very spiritual realization that there's something more, if you will. And let's see, one thing that influenced me was Brian's autobiography, and most of this, 99% of it, I couldn't care less. But the trip experiences as laid out in this, I thought, are very helpful, because they give you an idea of what you have in the behind the album, the reality that underlies the album. Because I think that the trip experiences are what is actually being expressed, but in a unique way. So let's see. So for instance, Joyous Cosmology, a book Brian was aware of, written by Alan Watts. This is a few trip experiences combined into one, and it was the attempt of the book is to convey a little bit of how it's like, to people who are not experienced in that way. Excuse me. And anyway, when another book that Brian was familiar with is The Act of Creation, Arthur Koestler's book, and that came out a year or two before Brian was working on SMiLE. And the big theory that Koestler advances is the bisociative theory, which is, again, two layers, and very often one hidden, or actually I think throughout all of them are hidden, or the second layer is always the hidden one. So as Koestler points out, in humor, you get a second way of thinking, which makes things funny. That's kind of not necessarily apparent at first. Then it's a matter of getting the joke or discovering it. And then the middle point across the triptych that Koestler points out is you have the same thing in science, where the big discoveries were made almost by chance, where people put together things that were thought separate, or that didn't go together, and that created a lot of the major scientific discoveries. And similarly in art, when you can watch a piece of art or whatever and realize there's something else going on, it brings out another layer that not everyone will see, but if you see it, it can be, of course, very strong and emotional and that kind of thing. But yeah, so Kessler's thing has the hidden layers of meaning, whatever, and the LSD, spiritual LSD experience has the hidden reality that underlies all reality. And let's see, so we go from that, and I think that's what you get in SMiLE, which, as I stated earlier, the other reality. And so if you take something, say, from this, Brian has a flashback in a bookstore, which he considers an LSD flashback. So, an acid flashback. So that, I think, his realization at the end of that was that it was presenting him with mysteries full of meaning. That's another dual layer thing, with the meaning being hidden. You have to search for it, or if you're presented with a riddle, you have to try and figure it out. So let me see. So on SMiLE itself, oh, by the way, this Surf and Colors, this is the first edition. But in SMiLE itself, you can take some of the music, and I'll show you this process, how it works out. So, for instance, Brian's flashback, I think maybe Heroes and Villains, all the little parts are similar to his visuals during the flashback. He sees books melting off of the shelf at the bookstore where he has that flashback, and the melting process I can see as the instruments fading down at the end of You Were My Sunshine, or I can see that as the long descending melody lines of Heroes and Villains. I can hear the flutter tone of Heroes and Villains and think of letters vibrating off the page during his bookstore flashback. So there are numerous things that you pick up from that. So that's one LSD related event. Another one was a battle with his family over the influence of Lauren Schwartz and some of Brian's drug taking, and you can see that maybe has something to do with Heroes and Villains, and a little bit of a battle going on. And let's see. So then you have his first trip. Brian's first trip involved a lava lamp and a piano, and I think sometimes wind chimes. A lot of wind chimes are hanging down from a window, so there's a piece of glass separating you from the wind chimes. Wind chimes are hanging down, not unlike lava at times in a lava lamp. The long strands of the lava dripping down, and it's behind glass inside the lamp. So I think maybe wind chimes, and then there's the piano part, with the 3-note pattern or 4-note pattern near in the middle. And I think, well, maybe that's Brian playing piano during the first trip. He also hears music comes through extremely loud. I think maybe the middle 8 or whatever you call it in wind chimes with the loud vocals could represent that. I think of the lava. I think that Hawaii was created by lava. I think that might have something to do with the Sandwich Isles. I think, do you like worms? The lava can look like worms at times. So there are a lot of things I can put together with the first trip. The second trip, as laid out in Air, involves fire engines. Now that seems like a pretty obviously something you could relate to the elements and the fire section, and the fact that it's so easily relatable to that may explain part of the reason why Brian had a strange reaction to the fire music at one point. And another thing, with the fire, you have the barnyard. The cook is chopping lumber for a fire. In Cabin Essence, you have the home on the range, which could also mean like a range you'd find in somebody's kitchen with the stove and the oven and all that. So there are references throughout for that trip, I think, as well. And then the third trip, Brian doesn't really go into, but in this dandy book, they do have the Crawdaddy interview with Paul Williams and David Anderley. And David talks about Brian having a great trip, which he says is Big Sur, but I believe that might be Lake Arrowhead. Regardless, that trip involves a lot of water, and I think you see that in SMiLE. Obviously, you have the water section, or what do you want to call it, in Blue Hawaii, or Love to Say Dada, and I think it's kind of joyous music, and I think that would matches up with what the book says about that being a great trip. So anyway, that's how I view SMiLE. The real meaning is kind of the meaning underneath, and I guess if you discovered that or came upon that or realized that, that would be, you'd either get the joke. See, if we go with Kessler stuff, you get the joke, you might start laughing, or you would be like a eureka moment of discovery, aha, and that would be great too. Or I think you could also have the artistic realization or whatever, or as an audience member, a consumer of art, and it could be very emotional as well. Anyway, that's my viewpoint on SMiLE. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to it, but that's kind of a summary, and I hope it works. All right, thanks a lot for your time.